But our topic tonight is who's to blame. It was interesting because I was chatting, thinking I had two topics I was going to do, and I was literally left it to the last 30 minutes just before to try and decide, which I do. I enjoy both of them. In a sense, the one is more positive, and this one I wouldn't say is negative, but I think it's maybe, as you'll see in a moment, it's maybe more appropriate for what's going on in the world at the moment. So, So we're going to look at this. So if you haven't joined yet, still can. There's the code at the top. So you'll just go to menti.com and use that code. Right. So let's start with a quick question. Obviously, this is not there's no right answer here. Who's to blame for the war in the Middle East? Let's have a moment to, see what people think. The answers, I'll just hide the votes for a second. So just who's to blame for the war in the Middle East? Is it Israel? Because they've kept the Palestinians under lock and key for a long time. Is it the Palestinians because they attacked Israel recently? Or is it the influence of all the others like the USA and Iran and all these other countries who are interfering in the Middle East and, making it a hard situation? Right. So, so we got a whole lot of people say, well, maybe it's others. Some say the Palestinians. So I think it depends who you had to ask this audience. Typically, a Christian audience would probably either blame the Palestinians or others. Very few would blame Israel. I'm sure if we had a few Muslims in this, it would probably be mainly Israel and maybe others. Right, here's another question. Who's to blame for global warming? Is it the rich nations, the West, USA, Germany, UK, etc.? Is it none of those specifically, but rather greedy corporates? Or maybe it's none of those. It's just natural. It's just a cycle of what's happening. So who's to blame for what we see? Maybe we just talk at the start of we have these floods and crazy things that are happening. A lot of scientists say this is global warming. Well, who is to blame for this? All right, we've got 7 people that responded. Let's have a look. 8, right. Yeah, well, some saying it's the rich nations, or they're neck on neck, greedy corporates, and no one's just natural. Yeah, so I mean, just on that, you could have a bit of debate. Some people would argue this is just part of the cycle. This is what the cycle is. We just haven't seen the cycle because we just in a very short slice of history. It's actually just a part of a natural, bigger meta cycle. Others will say, no, it's because of what we're doing to the planet. It's the rich, it's the greedy corporates, etc. Right. So, and you'll go into Twitter or X or whatever, and you'll find all sorts of debates about these things. So what do we do? In life, you can pick any topic, and not only any topic, even in our own personal situations, we end up getting involved in what I refer to as the blame game. You bump your car. Who's to blame? The person that parked badly, the stupid way the sun was shining. Your keys are lost. Who's to blame? Well, because I normally hang them there, but so and so had something else hanging there, couldn't hang my stuff there. It's whatever, I didn't put it there. So it doesn't matter what is in life. You can look at anything in life. You stub your toe. Who's to blame? Who put that silly thing on the floor there? And so we often we as humans naturally seek to blame people for something. And this started back in Eden. I mean, way back in the beginning. I mean, it's fascinating when you, and I'm not going to do that tonight, but when you look carefully at the series of questions and answers that between God and Adam and Eve, have you eaten of the tree? Oh, she said I should take it. Did you, take of the tree? No, the snake said I should have it. And none of them answer the question. It's all just like handed on, from Adam to Eve to the snake, and then there's poor snake sitting there with no one left to hand it over to. And so from the beginning, our natural response as humans has been to blame. And that's interesting because obviously Genesis is the seedbed of everything, has the seeds of everything in it. It has the seeds of hope. It's got the seeds of promise. It's got the seeds of redemption, of the curse, but it's also got the seeds of what we like as humans. And so at our core, we all naturally seek to blame something or someone for the things that happen to us. And that's an interesting thing to consider. The famous quote from Matthew 7, there's a little joke, you just told him that he has a splint in his eye and you have a beam in yours. That's obviously a play on Jesus' thing. We can sit there with complaining about the splinter. We got a big, someone else has got in the eye, but we got this big fat log in our eye. So it's typical of us to want to look at problems or to take the issues or the blame and hand it to someone else. So let's start with a quiz question. We've only got 3 quiz questions through the whole evening. So if you want to win this particular thing and you want to come out as number 1, I know within the Skierpa, Verleon, Furstenberg, especially that gang, there's lots of competition spirit. So if you want to come out top of this, you've only got 3 questions to do it in. And the way the questions work, they're multiple choice, but obviously the faster that you answer, the more points you're going to get. So you want to try and go quick. So obviously you could get it right, but you might not get as many points as the other person. But obviously if you answer too quickly, you might get it wrong. And you've only got 3. So see if you can start off as speedily as you can. So here is a question 1 of 3, and I'll spread them out through the talk. Right. Oh, this one, all answers get max points. So this is not a multiple choice. Okay. So this is a simple one. You've just got a bit of time to type this in. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord something the hearts. Okay. So see if you can type that in. You've got 15 seconds left to type in that verse is. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord something the hearts. So you should type in an answer and submit it. Right, 5 seconds. Everyone has voted. Right, well done. Everyone's got the answers in. All right, let's take a look. The correct answer is the Lord weighs. You might find some of the other versions have searches. Right. So we're lucky that no one actually got there. We got searches, sees, knows. This is funny. Having even prepared the talk, I actually myself couldn't remember what the word was. So you have to feel people out if you didn't get it either. I was like, what was the word again? But it's interesting that in our own eyes, everything seems right. And that's really where blame comes. But God is the one who ultimately weighs things. He's the one who weighs what is right and wrong. So when you look at our leaderboard, yep. Boaty back both face. I'm glad to see that made its way all the way here. And some guy is leading with 0 points above Peanut in 2nd place and Boaty in 3rd place. Right, everyone's equal at the moment. So an interesting way to look at blame. It's not that clear there. Maybe if you've got really good eyes, you can see at the very bottom there. I've taken the word blame and put a little hyphen in it. And to see the word blame as to be lame, because that's what blame essentially does to us. Blame incapacitates us. Blame stops us from moving. Blame stops us from acting. Because when you blame something or someone on circumstances, you yourself take no ownership of them. Therefore, you have no responsibility to do anything about whatever the thing is. So let's say you blame, and maybe sometimes you can't do something. Let's say you blame crime in our country on the government. Okay, so you can sit and moan and complain about it as much as you like, but you're never going to do anything because you can't do anything because there's not anything you can do. But then you get to things that are more closer to home. I'm unhealthy because I don't get a chance to exercise. Okay, and then, well, I don't have a chance to exercise, and that's why I'm always sick and unhealthy, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's because my boss never gives me any leave or any break or whatever it may be. The moment we take an issue and we hand it across to someone else, we become lame. And that's what blame does. Blame removes ownership and it removes the ability for us to act on things. And in a way, that's an interesting way to think about blame as being lame. Right, so that brings us to the short little story that we want to have a look at, which is from John 5. And I'm sure you know it well. It's the story where Jesus meets a lame guy. Oops, got some feedback. Hello, feedback. Feedback, go away. Okay, there it's gone. He meets this lame guy who's been lame for 38 years, and in the recap of the story, lying by this pool, he's too, incapacitated to actually get into the water, that he can actually get healed by whatever's going on there, the moving waters, hot springs, whatever it is. And so when Jesus gets to him, he has this conversation with him about, so what's the deal? What's going on? and ultimately heals this guy, who then gets up and, leaps off and is greatly relieved that he's been healed. But it's a particularly interesting story, particularly because of the question that we see is going to be asked. So John 5 then says, when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, which of the following did he ask him? Right, this is not a quiz question. This is just a have your vote. Did Jesus ask him, how are you feeling? Do you have any pain? What's wrong with you? Or none of these? Right. Which of these did Jesus ask him? When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he has been there in this condition for a long time, he asked him. Okay, and your question is going to come next. How are you feeling? Do you have any pain? What's wrong with you? Or was it none of these? All right. So we got 9 answers in. I think that's about everyone. Let's see what people have voted for. One said, how are you feeling? One said, what's wrong with you? And 7 said, it's none of these. Right. Actually, it was none of those. He actually asked him this. Now, we might have thought it might have been one of the others, how are you feeling? Or, what can I do for you type story. He asked him the most unusual question. Do you want to get well? Now, you think about it for a moment, you think, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, here's this guy. He's lame. He's lying there. He's been lying there for 38 years. 38. I mean, that is an unbelievable amount of time. He is desperately, he tries to drag himself to this water where everyone's trying to get to every time it bubbles, and he can't get there. And here comes this guy, looks at him and says, do you want to get well? I mean, you can imagine him looking up at Jesus and saying, what are you talking about? Do you think I want to be like this? What sort of question is that? I mean, do you think I want to be lame? I've been like this for 38 years. Do you think I haven't been trying to crawl my way to this bit of water every time it bubbles? What type of question is that? I mean, maybe the question you'd ask me is, how are you feeling today? Is, can I do something for you? This is the last question that he expected. And I think in Scripture, when we get a question or when, especially from Jesus, that seems unusual, it should make us stop and think, because Jesus didn't see as we see. So our natural human situation, if we saw someone in a difficult situation, someone crippled, etc., we would naturally go to them and say, wow, how did you end up like this? Is there anything I can do for you? I mean, how are you feeling? Whatever. We would hardly go to a person who's been lying on the street, definitely down and out, and say, do you want to get well? I mean, it's like almost insulting. I mean, obviously, it's like not the question you ask, but Jesus asked this question. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. So now's the second strange thing. The first strange thing is Jesus' question. His question doesn't seem to fit the situation. Do you want to get well? The second strange thing is this person's answer. If you ask someone a question, do you want to get well? There are typically two responses they can give you. Yes, I do want to get well, which would be the one you expect. Or no, I don't want to get well, which is obviously not what you expect. He doesn't answer with either of those. In fact, he doesn't even answer the questioner at all. He says, sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. So you look at this answer and you say, what's that? That's not what Jesus asked you. You see, Jesus is getting to the heart of this person. And he asked the question, just like with Adam and Eve, when God asks Adam and Eve the question, did you eat of the fruit? They never answer yes or no. They just say, Eve gave it to me. That's not the answer. When he asks Eve, did you eat of the fruit? She doesn't answer yes or no. She says, the snake said I should take of the fruit. They never answer the question. And so we have the same situation where Jesus is asked a question and his reply is a whole lot of reasons why he isn't well. You see, I can't get into the water because there's all these other guys, they're much more fresh and vigorous and they get there before me. And you can imagine just Jesus looking at him and said, that wasn't what I asked you. I asked you, do you want to get well? You telling me about all the reasons you can't get into the water. And so we get to this situation that we see over and over again in scriptures, particularly, and obviously in our own lives, of blame. when a situation arises in our own lives, when we're confronted by something, our natural course for most of us is to seek someone or something to blame. And I just want to, for a moment, look at the psychology of blame. Why is it as humans that we seek to blame something or someone else? So I'm going to give you a moment, and this is just a free form. You can just type something. Why do you think we choose to blame others for things that happen in our lives? So like the guy who couldn't get healed for 38 years, he gives all the reasons why he can't. Adam and Eve, they give all the reasons. But then just think of our own circumstances. You know, you lose something, you stub your toe, whatever it may be. We tend to naturally, our first natural thing is blame. I mean, politicians are great at this. I mean, we're going to see this when the elections come up. Every political party will tell you why they aren't the greatest thing out, because of the economy, because of corruption, because of the other party, because of the Americans, because of the Chinese. You can pick what you like. So as humans, we naturally blame. The question is why? Why do we do this? So I'll give you a few more seconds. I see we've got 5 people that have put in some answers, and we'll have a look at those in a moment. Right, so here we've got some responses. Fear of punishment, I think, is a very real one, and that would probably be the case with Adam and Eve. Typically, we don't want to receive the punishment, whether that's just anger or whatever, or some other punishment. We don't want to receive that. We don't want to take responsibility for our actions and thoughts, because if you say I'm responsible, then that has consequences. Which is linked to that next one, don't take responsibility. It takes the focus off our own lack of discipline and that we don't take responsibility. So again, you know, we're admitting fault. And I mean, we're humans. We don't want to, we like to talk about generic fault, but we don't like to actually have our own fault individually. We don't want to face the responsibility of the actions. Self-preservation, exactly. I suppose it's linked to fear of punishment. Takes away accountability, reduces personal guilt. That's a key one. If it's not me to blame, I don't have to feel guilty about it. So responsibility is an easy out. Absolutely. It's a quick out, or it seems like an easy out, maybe more, because ultimately, as we're going to see, or as I've already mentioned, blame makes us lame. And with that inability to move on means that we can never get out of the situation. So people who are alcoholics, typically that whole rehabilitation process starts with taking responsibility. So it's actually ultimately, while it seems like an easy out, it isn't. It's easy to blame someone else so we do not need to take responsibility. So a lot of themes around responsibility, around the fear of punishment and self-preservation, etc. So all of those are exactly it. So going to the psychologists and seeing what they have to say, you'll see similar things coming out. Why do we blame others? It's easy. We don't take responsibility, which requires action. So exactly that's what everyone said. If you take responsibility, typically, it means I must do something. So let's take a silly little example. There's, you know, spilled water or spilled wine on the carpet. Who did it? No, they did it. If I say I did it, what comes of that? Well, it means I'm going to have a whole lot of work trying to get the wine out of the carpet. If it's not me, it's someone else's problem. So we don't have to take responsibility, which means we don't have to have any action. So that seems great. I think another important one is we don't need to be vulnerable. And I think that's a difficult one for a lot of us. To be vulnerable means, yep, I'm wrong. Saying when we're wrong makes us vulnerable, makes us admit that we actually aren't perfect, that we aren't, you know, we haven't got it all figured out, that we do make mistakes. And that's not always the easiest thing for us to do. We don't have to accept that we don't always have control or behave in the ways we are proud of. You know, most of us like to think or portray that we have life under control. We are behaving like we should. You know, when you take blame, you basically are saying, you know, I'm a flawed human. I've made mess ups. I didn't do what was right. Knocked over the thing. I lied here, or I did what I shouldn't have done, or whatever it may be. I was lazy and this happened. And typically they're things that we wouldn't be proud of, and we'd have to take responsibility for them. If we blame others, we don't have to do that. And lastly, maybe, which brings them all together, it protects our ego. I'm a good person, the other person is bad, which is really where this whole thing started with Adam and Eve. You know, it was all about, how did the whole Adam and Eve story start? What did the serpent say? You take of this fruit and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil. You'll be like gods. From the start, we wanted to be gods. We've always wanted to be the gods. Who's the God? The God is the ultimate ego. He is that one. We're everything. And if we accept responsibility, all of a sudden we are vulnerable, which means we actually aren't the God, which means we actually are bad. We are actually sinners. We do make mistakes and everything that comes with it, which, as we all know, is the route to this humility, is where forgiveness comes in, etc. But if we blame, we can protect our ego. So those are some of the reasons why we do blame others, and you can see why they are very compelling. So in a way, if we have to look at blame, it might be seen as a harvest of pride, where all the things that we are trying to nurture in our life, the real proud things that are all about us, if you harvest that, what you end up is the only way you're going to be able to move forward is by blaming others. Because if you don't blame others, you're not going to be able to enjoy this wonderful harvest of me and my ego. Right, so how do we treat this terrible symptom that has been around since Adam and Eve? And I think in many ways it's getting worse. Social media has made it worse. You know, you just see people lurching from one thing to the other. You know, it was Black Lives Matter, it was Me Too, it was now it's Palestinians, Israel. I mean, it goes on and on. It's COVID, it was whatever, it doesn't matter what the thing is. It's global warming. There's just endless of these things that we have, where all we find happening is we're going to blame someone. And with social media, it gets even worse, because with social media, we can just sit here and, you know, take a position, this high ground, this moral high ground, and it's them who's at fault. Why is the world like them? It's the Democrats. No, it's the Republicans. No, it's the ANC. It's the DA. It's my neighbor. It's the black people. It's the white people. It's the Christian people. It's the Muslim people. And we can spread it with a hashtag now and get a whole lot of people to join us, boost up our ego, and make it appear that it's the other people that are to blame. And so we're in this terrible situation where social media is really fueling the situation that started back in Genesis. The serpent voice has now got such a powerful voice, blame is just going crazy. So how do we treat it? That's the big question. And I want to suggest that we treat it with HIM. And HIM is a little acronym. I know Lucas likes acronyms, so especially for Lucas. But this is a very short, acronym, just 3 little letters. But I believe it has the essence of how we should treat this virus, in a sense, this terrible condition of blame. And it's humility, identity, and movement. And these are the 3 elements, or the 3 steps that I believe can help us deal with blame. So the first step is humility. And I think it came out in some of your responses. You know, if we don't accept, or if we accept blame, if we don't pass blame onto someone else, it's a bit jarring, because we have to take responsibility for things. We've got to say, I'm wrong. We've got to say, I've made a mistake. We've got to say, I'm not perfect. We've got to bring our ego down. All of those things require this very first thing, which is humility. And we all know that humility is the foundation of discipleship. We know that we can't come to God unless we're humble. And it's the foundation, or the first step, of how we deal with blame. And so James 4:10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord. And what will happen? And he will lift you up. You see, this is step number 1. In the beginning, in Genesis, Adam and Eve wanted to be the gods. God didn't have a problem with that. In many ways, we read later in Exodus or in the Psalms, I've called you gods. We called to an incredible royal priesthood. We called to be the sons of God. We called to this divine status, but not through ourselves acquiring it, through a gift from God. It is humble yourselves with the Lord, and I will lift you up. Adam and Eve had the reverse way. I want to be God. And we still like that. We still want to be the gods. We still want to be the people who are the gods. And a God doesn't make mistakes. And therefore, a God has to protect his or her ego. Therefore, a God has to blame. But if we want to deal with this blame problem and what it's causing to our world and causing to ourselves personally, so forget the world, each of us individually, we have to start with H, humility. Humble yourselves before the Lord. And the wonderful part, and he will lift you up. The second part is identity. And I think this is a massive topic in itself, which I'm not going to deal with. But I think, we live in a world that is just absolutely confused by identity. I mean, it's just absolutely has no idea. I mean, what I'm going to say now, I would never have said even a year ago, where people don't know if they are male or female. People don't know if they're human or a horse. People don't know anything. Kids can come to school and say that they are a dog and behave like a dog, quite literally, and have to be recognized as a dog. A guy can decide he's a woman. He can decide he's anything. Whatever in your mind you decide you are, that's what you are. And we think, well, that sounds wonderful. It's this fluid identity. No, it isn't. We've got a world with so much depression now. People don't know who they are anymore. There are no norms. There's no boundaries. There's no principles, because we don't need any of those. But throwing out identity is throwing out the fundamental thing that roots us to things. When you think about identity, how much do we actually need it? Well, we all love identity as much as we might say we don't need it. Everyone wants identity. Even the LGBTQ, blah, 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 all those other letters have tried to create an identity, and they have to keep adding letters around this whole thing. We all desperately want identity. We watched the Springboks, for those of you who watch the Springboks win their games and everything. We loved it because identity was the team. Identity was the country. Identity brings us together, and we need identity. However, where does our identity come from? Because all of those other things are identities that can easily vanish. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. You see, at the end of the day, once we've been humbled, where should our identity come from? Not from a sports team, not from some affiliation. Our identity has to come from God. Our identity has to come from Jesus. And only when he becomes our identity can everything change. So it's absolutely vital that our identity comes from God, because that's the only thing that never changes. And unlike all the other identities, which are external, this is an internal identity. And once we have God as our identity, we have this rock solid thing. And so it doesn't matter if people criticize. It doesn't matter if we have to say, I'm wrong. That's great. Absolutely, I'm wrong. But Jesus is inside me, and he's making me right. And his righteousness covers me, but I'm wrong. But he's in me, and he makes me right. And so we don't have to prove ourselves, because it's all about him in us. And so that's the second one. So humility, identity. And then we come to the third aspect, and that is movement. Interestingly, at the moment, it is the month of November. And we have a group of us, we started us 3 years ago. I actually should have included now that I see all you guys, because I know you guys are all super athletes, all the Skipper extended family. We have, for the month of November, we have a thing that's called Movember. You've heard of Movember, maybe. That's where you got to grow a moustache, which is great. We have Movember. It's how much will you move in this month? And there's a group of, I don't know how many people have joined it, 15 or whatever it is, 20. And we have the spreadsheet and this WhatsApp group, and you've got to commit to move a certain number of kilometers a day, typically either walking or running. We've got a few ways you can translate if you do cycle or even swim back to kilometers, but typically it's walking or running. It doesn't matter if you walk to the toilet and back. And so people say, okay, I'm going to run 5 kilometers a day. That means I'm going to move 5 kilometers a day. So that means I'm going to do 150 in the month. And we monitor as we go through the month. We've got to hit our targets. And the whole idea is, over typically the December period, people tend to eat a lot more. So we want to go into December feeling like we've lost a bit of weight and we've been active. So that's why it's called Movember. And it makes you feel good. And that's what exercise does. Exercise makes you feel good. And it's the same thing when we come to this. This third step is the one that solves the problem ultimately. We've humbled ourselves. We've identified ourselves with Jesus, and we know that he is the one we can identify. He's the one that can change us. So he brings the change in. So it's repentance. It's acknowledgement of our source of power. And then what happens? Well, then the next and most critical aspect is pick up your mat and walk. That is the next step in this process. It is do something. You see, and some of the people actually were saying, why don't we want to accept blame? Well, there's a consequence. Absolutely. But that's what we want, because we can't grow unless we say, yes, you know what? I could do this better. I'm going to do this. I could clean up the mess. I could sort out the litter in our town. You know, it's not just the council's problem, whatever, whoever it is you're blaming. You know, I can do something. And so we start to move. And when we start to move, that's when change comes into being. And so Jesus says to that guy, get up, pick up your mat and walk. And that's it. Jesus wasn't going to entertain his game. He asked him a question. The guy starts to blame his circumstances. Jesus gives him the instruction, get up, pick up your mat and walk. And you look at how stuffful that is with the verbs, with action. Get up, pick up your mat, walk. It's like there's lots to do. There's lots for you to do right now. And that's the response. That's our response when it comes to dealing with blame in our own lives. That's our response to dealing with blame and handing off things to other people, is to get up, pick up our mat and walk and take a step forward and do something. Right. So question 2 of 3. Right. As I said, there's only 3 questions. Are you ready for this? So we get to the last few players in. We've got 7 players. I don't think any others are going to join us. 7 players. Right. So at the moment, the leaderboard is all equal. I've got a feeling this one could be a multiple choice now. So you are going to have to be speedy. Everyone get your fingers onto the devices. Oh, and it's all correct answers get max points. Oh, that's a bit boring, Craig. Right. So you've got time for this one. You get to type it in. For in something, we live and move and have our being. You get to type in the answer. This one's, why don't I give them such an easy one? I don't know. Okay, for in, what's the missing word? We live and move and have our being. If you've been vaguely listening, you will get the answer. I didn't even need to give you. I should have actually made that a timed one with the fastest gets it right, because this is so easy. Right, but you've got 5 seconds left. For in something, we live and move and have our being, a very famous verse. And here, for in him. Right, okay. Excellent. Not everyone getting it right. You should have figured out the word is him, because that's what I've been talking about. The key word that is the solution to blame is him. Humility, identity, movement. For in him we live and move and have our being. This is what it's about. If we want to move anywhere, if we want to get out of our situation of being stuck and lame and blame, what do we got to do? In him we live and move and have our being. It's in him that we get out of the deadly cycle of blame that makes us lame, that gets us out of that and enables us to do something. So not everyone got it, which is excellent. So let us see how our leaderboard is looking after that. Right, here we go. Oh, Look is on it, and Squeezle. And, oh, there was actually some time thing on there. Excellent. I see there was a timer, because Look is on it got the most points. Look is on it. Squeezle, very, very tricky little names for those 2 people. And Buddy McBoatface are the top 3 at the moment, with all the others sitting down there with nothing. But don't worry, there will be a moment for one more. So that's a key verse, maybe, to remember. For in him we live and move and have our being, from Acts 17:28. So the key is, it's about him. This is what changes us from living in blame: humility, identity, and movement. Just as a last little sort of type of segue, I want to for a moment consider not just blame, but when you are blameless. You know, it's one thing to say, well, you know, I spilled the juice on the carpet, accepting my blame, being humble about it, because I identify with God and I know it's not about me at the end of the day, and I must do something about it, which is movement. But what if you didn't spill the red juice on the white carpet? Someone else did, but you're going to take the blame for it. And like, yeah, no, that's a bit ridiculous. I didn't do it. I mean, it's bad enough for me to take the blame if I did do it. I'm going to take the blame for someone else. And that's a really difficult one to do. I want to share this little video. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but I'll share it anyway. It's not too long. It's about 4 minutes. I think it makes a lovely point about this. So hopefully it'll come through vaguely clear. I'll share this.
Βονές. Σε με βονές. Zire τώρα. Kdo? Shkon. Edhe mos e përsërit më. Qetësi. Hyr! Prap me vones. Shkon ta. Hyr!
Right, so I'm sure even without understanding the language, I mean, you could see how moving that was. So, you know, he has this little kid. He is accepting blame for something that's out of his control. He's there trying to help his brother or whoever it is, you know, in the wheelchair, and never actually obviously indicates that that's what the situation is. He just takes the blame. And so you look at that and you go, yo, I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, We live in a world where we won't even take blame for our own things. We take blame for things that are not even ours. But when we look at scripture, we see multiple examples of this. Exodus 32. So Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold. But now please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book that you've written." So here's Moses. He comes down. They've made this calf. They've done all this crazy stuff. And he says, "No, don't do anything to them. Blame me. I will take the blame. Blot me out of the book." And you think, well, that's unbelievable. Who does this? I mean, we can hardly take our own responsibility and blame for ourselves, yet alone someone else. I think a really interesting example is Daniel, because in a couple of verses, we actually see him playing out, in a sense, the solution to blame, the humility, identity, and movement. So in Daniel 9, verse 4 and 5, I prayed to the Lord, my God, and confessed, "Lord, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keeps his commandments, we have sinned and done wrong. We have been wicked and have rebelled. We have turned away from your commands and laws." And you think, well, there's no we in this. Daniel was upright. Daniel was serving God. The people that weren't serving God were the rest of the nation, yet he lumps himself with all of them. And it's we have done this, and we have turned away. And you think, what incredible humility to it's not like he's fooling God, like God says, "Oh, I know that, it wasn't you." He honestly is associating with the sin of the people, feeling their sin as part of his, that maybe he's let God down by the fact that they have not followed him with all their heart. And so he starts with that. And then he says this, "Give ear, our God, and hear. Open our eyes and see the desolation of the city that bears your name." This is where it's going to change. This is what it's about. Unless we associate with the name of God, after we become humble, if it's not about the name of God, if it's not about the name of the Lord Jesus, we literally have no route back. But if we do that, we get to the third aspect. Verse 19 says, "Lord, listen, Lord, forgive, Lord, hear and act. For your sake, my God, do not delay, because your city and your people bear your name." And so out of the identity comes action and is the movement. And this is exactly the process that over and over again, we humble ourselves, we associate with God, and then there's action. And God can work, and we can work. And that's where we get out of being lame, and we get out of this deathly trap of blame. And so in our own lives, we've all have mats, whatever our mat might be. We could be blaming our country. We could be blaming our physical condition. We could be blaming our parents, our upbringing. We could be blaming our children. We could be blaming the economy. We could be blaming our education, lack of it. We could be blaming our too much money, our too little money. We could be blaming our intellect, whatever it is. We all have a mat. You're on that mat there. We can write something. We can write lots of things. And we can sit on that mat for a year, for a month, for a week, for 38 years, for our whole life. But as long as we sit on that mat, we're going nowhere. And so the question is, how long are we going to sit on the mat and be lame? How long are we going to just do nothing? And Psalm 32 says, "When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away and I groaned all day long. Day and night, your hand of discipline was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water in the summer heat." And so that's what happens. As long as we sit on the mat, well, literally we can do nothing. We can just shrivel away. And when the master comes and says, "Do you want to get well?" we can just blame all the circumstances around us. And so that's not what we want to do. We've got to identify the mats that we sit on, and we've got to get off them and answer the question when Jesus asks us, "Do you want to get well?" It's a simple question that has only two answers, yes or no. Not a whole lot of excuses, not how big my mat is and how hard it is and how long I've been on it and how other people have also got other mats. It's not what he wants to know. Do you want to get well? Because if we are humble enough to answer the question and identify ourselves with him, then we can move and everything can change. And once the man was cured and he picked up his mat and he walked, and there we have it. His life changed like we cannot even begin to imagine, because most of us have never been in that situation. The change from lying on a mat for 38 years to walking is just astounding. But it's the same level of change that can happen in our lives when we leave behind the mats that we lie on. So We can be lame or we can walk in him. And at the end of the day, it's our choice as to which of those we want to do. But ultimately, the solution is him. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. And there we have it. Humility, identity in the Lord, and lifted up in great movement and huge possibility. So that's where it comes down to. And our final question for the evening, to see who will be at the top of the leaderboard as we finish off. Are you ready? We've got 3 players, finally a few players. The hamburger has joined. The tiger type thing has joined. Right, 7 players are ready. Let us see. This could be a speed question. Either way, let's see who is going to get out the top of the leaderboard. Here we have our final question. Right, this one is a speed question. Get ready. It's probably multiple choice. Where does this verse come from? Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Oh, man, we just saw it. James 4:10, 1 Peter 3:8, Zedekiah 1 verse 9. Few seconds left. Get your answer in. You've got to be speedy if you want max points. Right, time is dribbling out. And there we have it. And time is done. Oh, what a clever bunch of people. Everyone knew that it wasn't Zedekiah 1 verse 9, because that is a very difficult book to find in your Bible. It could have been 1 Peter 3 verse 8, but it wasn't. It was James 4 verse 10, and we just saw it. But who answered the fastest will be the one who is now on the top of the leaderboard. Here we have it. And as the numbers come in, Squeezle very fast. Boaty McFace also as fast as Squeezle. Could there be an upset? No, Look is on it, even though it wasn't the fastest. Holds on to the title. Look is on it, is the winner. Oh, what glee. The old fella still is triumphant. Look is on it. Squeezle so close. Oh, so close. Just by 3 points, it could have been the Squeezle. And then Boaty McFace all the way down to Peanut and others still languishing there at the bottom. Right. So there we have it. That's what we wanted to talk about tonight. I have no one to blame but myself if it was too long. So I'm going to stop my share and hand over to anyone who's got any comments.